Working at a convenience store was never in my plans, but after months of job hunting, I was grateful to secure a position at a small 24-hour store. As a recent college graduate with a degree in engineering, it wasn't the dream job I had envisioned, but it would suffice for the time being. I eagerly anticipated my first night shift. Being a night owl, the prospect of a quiet and peaceful shift appealed to me greatly. Mrs. Thompson, my manager, gave me a brief tour of the store and showed me the ropes before leaving me to manage the store solo as soon as dusk settled in. It didn't take long for strange things to start happening. The lights flickered sporadically, sending a chill down my spine. Brushing it off as an old wiring issue, I focused on stocking the shelves. However, as the night progressed, the odd occurrences escalated. Sounds of things shuffling and moving about echoed from the storage room, yet every time I investigated, no one was there. The sensation of being watched lingered, making it difficult to concentrate. Frustrated, I attempted to distract myself with a magazine. Minutes passed, the silence becoming suffocating. I tried calling Mrs. Thompson, but it went straight to voicemail. Deciding on a coffee break to stay alert, I retrieved my mug from the storage room where I had left my backpack. Upon opening the door, my heart nearly stopped. A figure in all black wearing a warlock Halloween mask and brandishing a knife stood before me. "Don't make a sound," he whispered menacingly. Fear gripped me as I envisioned the worst. He advanced, laughter dripping with malice. Panic surged as he demanded all the cash from the register. Realizing resistance was futile, I complied, handing over the money. The sight of fresh blood on the knife's edge intensified my terror. As soon as he fled, I dialed 911, shaken by the ordeal. Police arrived promptly, taking my statement, but with no security cameras or evidence, there was little they could do. I felt a slight betrayal from Mrs. Thompson. Her negligence in not having cameras installed left me traumatized. The image of that knife pointed at me haunted my thoughts. It was a true horror story unfolding in the very store I had innocently started working in. I never returned for another night shift, haunted by the memory of that terrifying experience. I was working the midnight shift at Mercy Hospital. It was during my last year in college, and I needed to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. So I took on the night shift at the hospital, thinking it would be a quiet and uneventful job. The first few weeks were just that, quiet and uneventful. I would arrive at the hospital when the moon was high in the sky and the city was asleep. The halls were dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the flickering light. But then, one night everything changed. I was making my rounds, checking on patients and ensuring everything was in order. That's when I saw him, a young boy, no older than 7 or 8, standing at the end of the hallway. At first I thought it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. But as I got a bit closer, I realized that this was no ordinary child. His eyes were hollow, devoid of life, and his presence made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I nervously said, "Hey kiddo, are you lost?" But the boy didn't respond. Instead, he slowly turned and walked down the hall, disappearing into the darkness. I brushed it off as exhaustion, thinking I was just imagining things. But as the nights went on, I kept seeing him, always in the same spot, always silent, always vanishing before I could reach him. I would ask my colleagues if they had seen the boy, but no one else had encountered him. It was like he was only there for me to see. One night, curiosity got the better of me. When he appeared again, I followed him down the hall, determined to find out who he was and why he was at the hospital. But no matter how fast I walked, he always stayed just out of reach. It wasn't until I mentioned the sightings to one of the nurses that I learned the truth. She looked at me with a solemn expression and told me that a child had died during the day shift a few weeks ago, a young boy who had been battling a serious illness. My heart sank as I realized who I had been seeing all this time, the boy's ghost, unable to find peace even in death. I was overwhelmed with sadness and unease. But why was he appearing to me? What did he want? One night, as I made my rounds, I felt a cold breeze pass through the hallway. I knew he was there, watching me from the shadows. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I whispered into the darkness, my voice trembling. And then, for the first time since I had seen him, the boy spoke. His voice was soft, but I heard every word. "I just wanted someone to know I'm still here," he said, his tone filled with longing. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the depth of his loneliness. He was a child who had passed away too soon, and now he was trapped in this limbo between worlds. "I'll remember you," I promised, my voice choked with emotion. "I'll make sure people know you're still here." With that, the boy's ghost faded away, leaving me alone in the quiet hallway. The next morning, I spoke to the hospital staff about what I had been experiencing. At first, I was kind of hesitant to share what had been happening, but surprisingly, they listened with open hearts, and together, we decided to create a memorial for him. It included a small candle, a stuffed teddy bear, and a couple of kind notes written by all of us. From that day on, I never saw the boy's ghost again, and I'd like to think that he found peace, knowing that he hadn't been forgotten. Let me take you on a chilling journey from my nights as a paramedic. Working the night shift can bring its fair share of eerie encounters, but nothing prepared me for the night we responded to a call in the seedy part of town. It was a typical night. My partner Jake and I were cruising through the quiet streets, ready to respond to any emergency that came our way. The radio crackled to life, dispatching us to a single car accident in the outskirts of town. We arrived at the scene, the headlights illuminating the twisted wreckage of the car. The driver's side was crumpled, and it was clear that whoever was inside had suffered severe injuries. Jake and I rushed to assess the situation. Unfortunately, it was too late for the driver. He was slumped over the steering wheel, lifeless. It was a grim sight, but we had seen our fair share of tragedies. As we were securing the scene and preparing to call for backup, something caught our attention. A faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of the night breeze. I exchanged a puzzled glance with Jake, wondering if we were imagining things, but then we heard it again, clearer this time, coming from the direction of the nearby woods. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, his voice filled with unease. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. We knew we had to investigate. It was our duty to ensure there were no other victims in need of help. Leaving the car accident behind, we ventured into the dark woods, our flashlights cutting through the shadows. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if they were beckoning us deeper into the forest. With each step, the atmosphere grew more unsettling. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Without a doubt, it felt like we were intruding on something not meant for our eyes. Then we saw a figure standing among the trees, illuminated by the pale moonlight. It was the driver from the car accident, but something was off. His form flickered and wavered like a ghostly apparition. My heart raced as I realized we were face to face with a spirit, a restless soul trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. The ghostly figure stared at us with dark, hollow eyes, his presence scaring the living crap out of us. Jake and I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The ghostly figure spoke, his voice a chilling echo in the night. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered, his words filled with sorrow and accusation. I felt a lump form in my throat, unable to find words to respond. Jake, ever the composed one, took a step forward. "We're here to help," he said, his voice steady despite the unnerving situation. "Is there something you need?" The ghostly figure's form flickered again, as if struggling to maintain its presence. "Help me," he said, his voice growing fainter. "Where am I? What happened?" I could feel the weight of his words, the sadness and desperation in his voice. But before we could offer any further assistance, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving us standing in the darkness. We returned to the crashed car, shaken by our encounter. We called in the situation and waited for backup to arrive, but never mentioned what we experienced in the woods. But even as we left the scene, the echoes of the ghostly figure's voice lingered in my mind. Thankfully, that was the first and last time I experienced anything like that, and I kept working as a paramedic for a few more years after the incident. Jake, however, well, he quit just a few days after. This happened a good while ago, when I was working at the front desk at a hotel. It was a regular evening shift, nothing out of the ordinary. The lobby was quiet, the air filled with the faint hum of the heater and the occasional shuffle of papers. I was busy sorting through reservations when the door chimed, signaling the arrival of new guests. I looked up and saw them, a couple, standing in the doorway like they had just stepped out of a noir film. They were dressed in dark clothes, their faces obscured by shadows. Instantly, a chill ran down my spine. They approached the front desk, their movements slow and deliberate. The man spoke first, his voice low and gravelly. "We need a room for the night. We are paying cash," he said, his eyes fixed on me in a way that made me uneasy. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot of fear tightening in my stomach. "Of course, let me check our availability." As I searched for an empty room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this couple. Their demeanor was too intense for a simple hotel check-in. Finally, I found a room and handed them the key. The woman's eyes lingered on me for a moment too long before they turned and disappeared down the dimly lit hallway. I tried to push the encounter out of my mind, chalking it up to nerves or an overactive imagination. But as the hours passed, strange things started happening. I heard faint whispers in the hallway, voices that seemed to echo from nowhere. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, and the air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing just beyond the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious couple had brought something with them, something dark and sinister. Then around 11 p.m. I turned on the TV in the lobby, hoping to distract myself from the eerie atmosphere. And there, on the late evening news, was a story that made my heart stop. Images of the same couple who had checked into our hotel were all over the screen. As I listened to the reporter's words, carjacking, robbery, murder, the couple was wanted in connection with a string of crimes that had left a trail of devastation across several states. I felt my blood run cold as I realized the danger I was in. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and dialed the local police, my voice trembling as I told them about the guests at our hotel. The police arrived quickly, their presence bringing a sense of relief and dread. They searched the couple's room, uncovering evidence of their crimes, stolen goods, weapons, and a map with a chilling pattern of their travels. It turned out that the couple had been on the run, using hotels like ours as temporary hideouts before moving on to their next target. I hid behind the counter as the police led the couple away in handcuffs. I felt a sense of horror at how close I had come to danger. The encounter with the mysterious couple had left me shaken, my sense of safety shattered. But the story doesn't end there. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered in the hotel, a lingering darkness that whispered in the shadows and sent shivers down my spine. To this day, I wonder about the secrets that old hotel holds, and I pray that I never encounter guests as chilling and menacing as that mysterious couple ever again. I was working as a 911 dispatcher. Being a dispatcher can be intense, especially during the night shift when all sorts of strange calls come in. But this night was different. It was downright chilling. It started like any other shift. I settled into my seat, ready to handle whatever emergencies came my way. The first few calls were typical calls, a car accident here, a medical emergency there. But then, as the clock ticked closer to midnight, things took a creepy turn. The phone rang, and I answered with my usual professional tone. But what I heard on the other end shook me to the core. A faint voice, barely audible, pleading for help. 911, what's your emergency? I asked, my heart racing with anticipation. The voice on the other end was panicked, almost frantic. Please, you have to help me. Please help me. I tried to calm the caller down, asking for their location so we could send help. But the man just kept repeating their plea for help, never giving any details about where they were. Before I could trace the call, it dropped. I frowned, feeling a knot of unease form in my stomach. I sat there for a minute, wondering what happened and hoping they'd be able to call back. But the night was just getting started. More calls came in, each one more disturbing than the last. One caller claimed to be trapped in a dark underground tunnel. Another said they were being chased by something inhuman. With each call, my sense of unease grew. It was like a dark cloud had settled over the dispatch center, casting a shadow of fear over us all. Then finally, the man called back, and this time the call lasted long enough for us to trace the location. But what we found sent a chill down my spine. The call had originated from the middle of a river. I stared at the screen in disbelief. How could someone be calling from a river? It didn't make sense. We dispatched emergency services to the location, but when they arrived, they found something that shook us all to the core. A body submerged in the water. We later found out that it had been there for over a week. I couldn't believe it. The person calling for help couldn't have made that call. They were already dead. The investigation that followed uncovered no leads, no suspects, nothing. It was as if the calls were coming from beyond the grave. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me that night. I don't know what or who was making those calls, but one thing's for sure, I'll never forget that creepy night. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.